Cassidy Morgan, 32, never imagined that a simple DNA test kit, a Christmas gift from her husband, would demolish her entire reality. The results revealed I wasn't biologically related to either of my parents. When confronted, my mother broke down in tears while my father screamed, "We wish you were never born." That's when 20 years of suppressed family secrets exploded, setting me on a path that would ultimately bring an entire wealthy dynasty to its knees and reveal the truth about who I really am. Before I dive into this wild journey of family betrayal and sweet karma, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you enjoy real-life revenge. Stories with unexpected twists. This family drama has lessons we can all relate to about loyalty, identity, and standing up for yourself. Now let's get into how my life fell apart and how I rebuilt it stronger than ever. I grew up in Westbrook, Connecticut in a sprawling colonial home with a perfect view of the Atlantic. My father, Richard Morgan, was the CEO of a prestigious investment firm that had been in our family for 3 generations. My mother, Eleanor, was the quintessential society wife, charity galas, tennis at the country club, and meticulously maintained highlights that never showed a hint of gray. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. My younger brother, Tyler, was the golden child Harvard Business School captain of the rowing team and already being groomed to take over the family business. I was the dutiful daughter who'd followed my mother's footsteps into interior design, married well to James Hamilton, a surgeon from the Wright family, and never caused a ripple in our carefully curated family image. Every Thanksgiving, we posed for our annual family portrait in coordinating outfits. Every Christmas Eve, we attended the same exclusive party at the Westbrook Yacht Club. Every summer, we vacationed at the same beachfront property in the Hamptons. Our lives ran like clockwork, predictable, prestigious, and utterly false. I never quite felt like I belonged. While Tyler had my father's commanding presence and my mother's social grace, I was always the odd one out. I was more reserved, creative, and questioned things the rest of my family took for granted. My mother called it my artistic temperament, but there was always an undercurrent of disappointment when she said it. "Try to be more like your brother," she'd say, smoothing my unruly curls. Life is so much easier when you just fit in, but no matter how hard I tried, I never quite managed to fit the Morgan mold. While they were all tall and blonde with piercing blue eyes, I was petite with auburn hair and hazel eyes. Family friends would often comment on how I must take after some distant relative, and my parents would exchange quick glances before agreeing. "She gets her coloring from Richard's grandmother," my mother would explain smoothly. "Those genes just pop up every few generations." I never questioned this explanation. Why would I? These were my parents, my family, my identity. Even as an adult, when James would occasionally point out how different I looked from my family, I'd shrug it off with the same explanation I'd heard all my life. James and I had been trying to have a child for 3 years when he gave me the Ancestry DNA kit for Christmas. "I thought it would be fun," he said, eyes bright with excitement. "We can learn about your genetic background before we have kids. Plus, these tests can identify potential health concerns. It's practical." It was practical, thoughtful even. James was always that way, thinking ahead, planning for our future. I never imagined that his practical gift would obliterate everything I knew about myself. I spit in the tube, mailed it off, and forgot about it for weeks. Work was busy. I was designing the interior for a new boutique hotel downtown, and life carried on as usual. Sunday dinners at my parents' weekday lunches with my mother and her friends' board meetings where I sat quietly while my father and brother discussed the company's future. The email came on a Tuesday. "Your results are ready," the subject line announced cheerfully. I opened it during my lunch break, expecting to see a breakdown of European countries and maybe some interesting health traits. Instead, what I saw made no sense. According to the test, I had no genetic connection to the Morgan family line that my brother and several cousins had already registered in the system. The site suggested that perhaps I had been adopted. I laughed it off at first. Clearly, there had been a mistake. I called James immediately. The test must be wrong, I insisted. These things aren't 100% accurate, right? They're actually extremely accurate for determining close family relationships, he said cautiously. Cassidy, have your parents ever mentioned adoption? Of course not, I snapped. But even as I denied it, memories began to surface. The awkward glances when people commented on my appearance, the lack of baby photos compared to Tyler's extensively documented early years, the way my father had always kept a certain emotional distance. I decided to confront my parents that very evening. I didn't call ahead, something I never did, and drove directly to their house after work. The housekeeper let me in surprised by my unannounced visit. My parents were in the study, my father with his usual scotch, my mother reviewing plans for her next fundraiser. They looked up in surprise when I walked in. "Cassidy, we weren't expecting you," my mother said, her perfect smile not quite reaching her eyes. I didn't bother with small talk. I simply placed the printed results on the mahogany desk between us. "Is there something you need to tell me?" My voice was surprisingly steady, despite the earthquake happening inside me. The room went utterly silent. My father's face hardened into a mask I'd seen him wear during tough business negotiations. My mother's smile disappeared completely. "Where did you get this?" my father demanded, not even bothering to deny anything. "James gave me a DNA test for Christmas." "Is it true? Am I adopted?" My mother began to cry silently, perfect tears that didn't disturb her makeup. My father stood up abruptly and walked to the bar to refill his drink. "Richard, we should tell her," my mother whispered. "She deserves to know." "She deserves nothing," he hissed back. "We gave her everything, a life most people could only dream of." I stood there feeling like I was watching a play about strangers. "Just tell me the truth, please." My father turned to me, his expression cold. "You're not adopted, Cassidy. The truth is much messier than that. Your mother had an affair. You are the result." The words hit me like physical blows. Not adopted, the product of an affair. I looked at my mother, who couldn't meet my eyes. "Is this true?" I whispered. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "It was a mistake. One time, your father and I were going through a difficult period." "Enough, Eleanor," my father cut her off. "The details don't matter. What matters is that we chose to raise you as our own, despite everything. And this is how you repay us, by dredging up ancient history." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I didn't dredge up anything. I took a DNA test, not knowing what it would show. I deserve to know who I am. "Who you are?" my father laughed bitterly. "You're the living embodiment of the worst mistake your mother ever made. We wish you were never born, but we did the honorable thing. We gave you our name, our home, every advantage." The room spun around me. In that moment, 32 years of feeling like an outsider suddenly made perfect, horrible sense. I don't remember driving home that night. James found me sitting in my car in our driveway engine, off staring blankly ahead. He took one look at my face and knew something catastrophic had happened. Inside our house, the words tumbled out between sobs. The DNA test, the confrontation, my father's cruel words. "I'm so sorry," James kept saying, holding me as I fell apart. "I never should have given you that test." But once the initial shock wore off, questions began flooding in. If my father wasn't my biological father, then who was? Did my mother know? Was this other man still in her life somehow? Had my entire childhood been built on a foundation of lies I couldn't eat? I couldn't sleep. I called in sick to work for the first time in my career. James suggested therapy, and I agreed immediately. I needed help processing this seismic shift in my identity. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my mother, but I couldn't bear to speak to her yet. My father didn't reach out at all. Tyler called once, leaving a terse voicemail. Whatever is going on between you and Mom and Dad needs to stop. You're upsetting everyone, and it's affecting Dad's focus at work." 3 days after the confrontation, my mother showed up at our door. James was at the hospital for his shift, and I almost didn't answer. But some desperate need for answers pushed me to let her in. She looked smaller somehow, her perfect exterior cracking. She'd aged years in days. "Cassidy, please," she began. "You have to understand. It was a different time." "What was his name?" I interrupted, not interested in excuses. She flinched. "Your father doesn't want me to tell you." "He's not my father," I said flatly. "And I'm a 32-year-old woman, not a child you can keep in the dark. I deserve to know where I came from." My mother sank onto our sofa, her designer purse clutched like a shield. "His name was Daniel Harrington. He worked for your father, a new hire in the investment firm, brilliant with numbers, charismatic. It was just a brief thing, a terrible mistake." "Did he know about me?" She shook her head quickly. "No. Your father, Richard, fired him before I even knew I was pregnant. He moved away and we agreed never to speak of it again. We raised you as our own. You raised me as an outsider," I corrected. "Always different, always slightly less than Tyler." "Did he know? Does Tyler know I'm not Richard's biological daughter?" "No." She looked genuinely shocked. "No one knows. Just your father and me. We've kept this secret for your entire life. To protect me or to protect your reputation?" The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. "Both," she admitted quietly. "The scandal would have destroyed our family, our position in the community. And what good would it have done you to know? We gave you everything, except the truth. Except acceptance." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I want to find him." "Daniel." My mother's face drained of color. "You can't. Your father would never forgive you." "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm telling you what I'm going to do." She stood up, straightening her spine with the same social poise I'd watched her display thousands of times at awkward dinner parties. "I'm begging you to reconsider. Nothing good can come from this. Let sleeping dogs lie, Cassidy. You've had 32 years to tell me the truth. You chose not to. Now I get to make my own choices." After she left, I began my search. Daniel Harrington wasn't an uncommon name, but with the details my mother had provided, his employment at Morgan, investments in the early 1992s, his expertise in finance, I had somewhere to start. I reached out to my father's longtime assistant, Margaret, who had always had a soft spot for me. She was nearing retirement and had nothing to lose by helping me access old employee records. I told her I was working on a family history project, and she didn't ask questions when I requested information about employees from that era. "There was a Daniel Harrington who worked here briefly," she confirmed over coffee at a cafe far from the office. "Brilliant young man. Your father fired him quite suddenly. Office gossip suggested he'd made some unethical investment move, but nothing was ever proven." She promised to discreetly look for more information in the archives. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator using money from my personal savings rather than the trust fund my parents had established. This was my search, not theirs. 2 weeks passed. James was supportive but concerned about my growing obsession. My father sent a terse email demanding I cease this ridiculous investigation immediately. My mother called daily, alternating between tearful pleas and stern warnings. Then Margaret came through. She found an old address for Daniel in the personnel files, along with a note about his subsequent employment at a firm in Boston. It wasn't current information, but it was a lead. The private investigator did the rest. Daniel Harrington, now 62, was living in Portland, Maine. He had never married, but had built a successful career as a financial consultant for sustainable businesses. He had no children, at least none he knew about. I stood outside his office building for nearly an hour before finding the courage to go inside. The receptionist smiled warmly when I gave my name. Do you have an appointment with Mr. Harrington? No, I admitted. But I think he might want to see me. When Daniel Harrington walked into the reception area, I knew immediately. He had my eyes, or rather I had his, the same unusual hazel with flecks of gold. He was tall and lean, with auburn hair now streaked with gray. I saw my own features reflected in his face, the high cheekbones, the shape of the nose, the way one eyebrow arched slightly higher than the other. He looked at me with polite confusion. "Can I help you?" My carefully prepared speech vanished. All I could say was, "My name is Cassidy Morgan. My mother is Eleanor Morgan. I think you might be my father." His coffee cup slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor between us. Daniel's office was minimalist but warm, lots of natural wood, large windows overlooking a small harbor, plants thriving in the sunlight. It was nothing like my father's Richard's imposing space, designed to intimidate. We sat across from each other, both too stunned to speak at first. Finally, he broke the silence. I never knew he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Eleanor never told me she was pregnant. I swear to you I had no idea." "I believe you," I said, and I did. The shock on his face had been too genuine to fake. I only found out 2 weeks ago that Richard Morgan isn't my biological father. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as my own. "This is incredible. You look so much like my mother." A lump formed in my throat. "I have a grandmother," had he corrected gently. "She passed away 5 years ago." "But yes, you had a grandmother, and I have 2 sisters, your aunts, a whole family you never knew about." The weight of all I had lost, 32 years of connections, relationships, heritage, hit me hard. "Why did you leave? My mother said you were fired." Daniel's expression darkened. "Is that what she told you? That I was fired? I suppose that's technically true, but it doesn't come close to the real story." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the water for a long moment before turning back to me. "I fell in love with your mother. It wasn't just some office affair. We were deeply in love, or so I thought. She told me her marriage to Richard was essentially over. They were staying together for appearances and for their son. She promised she would leave him after the holidays. This didn't match my mother's version at all. She said it was a mistake, a one-time thing." Daniel laughed bitterly. "It was a 6-month relationship. We were making plans for our future. Then suddenly she broke it off. Said she couldn't leave Richard after all, that she'd made a terrible mistake. A week later, I was called into Richard's office, accused of financial impropriety, and fired on the spot. He made sure I couldn't get work anywhere in Connecticut. I had to start over in Boston." My mind reeled. "Did he know about you and my mother?" "Oh, he knew. The things he said to me. He made it clear he knew exactly what had been going on. But publicly, it was about my supposedly unethical trading practices. He destroyed my reputation in financial circles. It took me years to rebuild my career. I felt sick. I'm so sorry." "It wasn't your fault," Daniel said firmly. "None of this was your fault. But I need to know, why are you here now? What do you want from me?" It was a fair question. What did I want? Validation, a relationship, revenge against the parents who had lied to me my entire life. "I just wanted to know where I came from," I said finally. "Who I am." Daniel sat back down across from me. "I understand that. But there's more, isn't there? I can see it in your face. You have your mother's terrible poker face, by the way. That made me smile, despite everything. There is more. Since finding out the truth, I've discovered other lies. The Morgan family business isn't as ethical as they pretend to be. My father Richard has been involved in some questionable investments, and the way he treated you." Cassidy Daniel interrupted gently. "Be careful about seeking revenge. I spent years being angry at Richard and your mother. It nearly destroyed me. I don't want revenge," I insisted. "I want justice and truth. My entire life has been built on lies. We talked for hours. Daniel showed me photos of his family, my family, and told me stories about growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Providence. He was nothing like Richard Morgan with his old money and cold calculation. Daniel was warm, ethical, passionate about using finance to support sustainable businesses. "Why didn't you ever marry or have other children?" I asked. A shadow crossed his face. "After your mother, I was broken for a long time. By the time I healed, I'd thrown myself into building my career. There were relationships, but nothing that lasted. As afternoon turned to evening, Daniel insisted on taking me to dinner. Over pasta at a small Italian restaurant overlooking the water, we continued getting to know each other. I told him about James, my design work, my life in Connecticut. "You seem happy," he observed, "despite everything." "I was," I admitted. Or, "I thought I was." Now, I'm not sure what parts of my life were real and what parts were just fitting into the mold my parents created. "You get to decide that," Daniel said. "You get to choose which parts to keep and which to leave behind." As we were finishing our meal, my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Dad knows you went to Portland today." He's furious. "What are you doing?" I showed the message to Daniel, who frowned. "They're having you followed, apparently." I wasn't even surprised. Control was my father's specialty. Daniel insisted on walking me back to my hotel. At the entrance, he hesitated. "What happens now, Cassidy, after you go back home?" It was the question I'd been avoiding. What did happen now? Return to my life as if nothing had changed. Pretend I hadn't discovered this whole other identity. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'd like to keep in touch if that's okay with you." "I'd like that very much." He handed me his card with his personal number written on the back. "Whenever you're ready, no pressure." Back in my hotel room, I found more texts from my mother and brother and a scathing email from my father threatening to cut me off financially if I continued this ridiculous charade. Their panic only confirmed what Daniel had told me. This wasn't just about an affair. There was something bigger they were afraid I would discover. I called James and told him everything. "There's more going on here than just a family secret," I concluded, "and I'm going to find out what it is." "Be careful," James warned. "Your father is a powerful man." I thought of Daniel, whose life had been derailed by Richard Morgan's power and influence. I know exactly how powerful he is. That's why someone needs to stand up to him. I returned to Connecticut with a plan. If my parents thought I would meekly return to the fold after discovering their lies, they were about to be severely disappointed. I wasn't just Cassidy Morgan anymore. I was also Cassidy Harrington, daughter of a man who valued ethics over profit and truth over appearances. James was concerned about my determination to dig deeper into the Morgan family business. "What exactly are you looking for?" he asked, as I set up what he called my investigation headquarters in our home office. "I'm not entirely sure yet," I admitted. But Daniel mentioned that my father accused him of financial impropriety as an excuse to fire him. What if that was projection? What if my father was the one involved in something unethical? With my background in interior design rather than finance, I needed help navigating the complex world of investment banking. I reached out to a college friend, Mia Chen, who had become a financial journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. "Let me get this straight," Mia said when we met for coffee. "You just found out your dad isn't your biological father, and instead of going to therapy like a normal person, you're launching an investigation into his business practices." I laughed despite myself. "When you put it that way, it does sound a bit extreme. But there's something not right here, Mia. The way they've reacted, the way they're having me followed. It's not just about an affair from 30 years ago. Mia's journalistic instincts kicked in. "What do you know so far?" "Not much," I admitted. Morgan Investments has been in the family for 3 generations. They manage portfolios for some of the wealthiest families in New England. My father Richard took over from his father about 25 years ago and grew the company significantly. My brother is being groomed to take over next. Any public scandals, SEC investigations, lawsuits, Nothing major that I know of. They've always maintained an impeccable reputation. Mia tapped her fingers thoughtfully on her coffee mug. Sometimes the companies with the most pristine public images have the most to hide. What does your father invest in primarily? I shrugged. Traditional stuff, I think. Blue chip stocks, real estate. I was never included in the business discussions. Convenient, Mia noted. Look, I can do some digging, but you need to understand something. If your father is involved in anything illegal and you help expose it, there's no going back. Your family relationships, your social standing, possibly even your financial security could be at risk. I thought about Daniel, whose career and reputation had been destroyed by my father's vindictiveness. I understand the risks, but I need to know the truth. Over the next few weeks, I lived a double life. On the surface, I appeared to be making peace with my family, attending Sunday dinners, albeit with a new coldness toward my parents and avoiding any mention of Daniel Harrington. Meanwhile, Mia and I were quietly investigating Morgan Investments. We discovered that much of the firm's impressive growth over the past 2 decades came from investments in what my father called emerging markets, which turned out to be a euphemism for environmentally destructive industries in developing countries with minimal regulations. Logging operations, destroying protected rainforests. Mining companies displacing indigenous communities. Chemical plants polluting local water supplies. It was the exact opposite of what Daniel stood for with his ethical investment practice, and it went against everything I believed in personally. But the real bombshell came when Mia uncovered a pattern of shell companies and offshore accounts linked to Morgan Investments. These entities were being used to hide investments in companies sanctioned by the U.S. government for human rights abuses and environmental crimes. This is serious, Cassidy, Mia warned. We're talking about potentially criminal activity here. Money laundering, sanctions violations. Your father could go to prison for this. The revelation left me stunned. I had expected to find evidence of unethical behavior, perhaps some tax avoidance, not international crimes. This was bigger than my personal family drama. This affected countless vulnerable communities around the world. I needed advice from someone who understood both finance and ethics. I called Daniel. I wish I could say I'm surprised, he said, after I explained what Mia and I had discovered. I saw hints of this kind of behavior when I worked there. It's one of the reasons your mother and I connected initially. She claimed to be troubled by Richard's business practices. What should I do with this information? I asked. There was a long pause. That depends on what you want the outcome to be, Cassidy. If you're looking to punish your parents for lying to you, there are less nuclear options than a federal investigation. This isn't about punishment, I insisted. It's about doing the right thing. These investments are hurting real people. Then I think you already know what you need to do, Daniel said quietly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced our bedroom, weighing my options, while James watched with growing concern. Whatever you decide, he said, finally I'll support you. But please be certain this is what you want. Was it what I wanted? To potentially destroy my family's legacy, to send my father, the man who raised me, however imperfectly, to prison, to devastate my mother and brother in the process? No, it wasn't what I wanted. But allowing the harm to continue wasn't an option either. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to an attorney specializing in whistleblower cases. The second was to my brother Tyler. We need to talk, I told him. Privately. No parents, no spouses. Just you and me. We met at a quiet bar far from our usual haunts. Tyler arrived looking irritated. This better be important, he said. I canceled a meeting with potential investors for this. I slid a folder across the table. It's important. You need to see these documents before I take them to the SEC. Tyler's face paled as he flipped through Mia's careful documentation of Morgan Investments' illegal activities. Where did you get this? He demanded. Does it matter? It's real and you know it. He closed the folder, his hands shaking slightly. "What do you want? Money? A bigger role in the company?" I was stunned by his response. "You're not even going to deny it," Tyler laughed bitterly. "What's to deny? This is how business works at this level, Cassidy. It's how Dad built the company into what it is today. It's how he afforded your fancy art school, and your perfect wedding, and your charming life playing with fabric swatches, while the rest of us do the real work." His words stung, but I didn't take the bait. "This isn't about me versus you, Tyler. This is about right and wrong." "So self-righteous," he sneered. "And what exactly is your plan here? Turn Dad and destroy the company, ruin our family name, all because you found out you're not really a Morgan." I looked my half-brother in the eye. "I'm giving you one chance to fix this. You and Dad need to divest from these illegal operations immediately. Make it right with the communities that have been harmed. Transform Morgan Investments into an ethical company." Tyler laughed incredulously. "Or what? Or I take everything I have to the authorities." "And to the press?" Hey there! Speaking of family secrets and tough choices, this story is getting intense, right? Before I continue with what happens next in Cassidy's journey, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Are you Team Cassidy or Team Tyler right now? Sometimes standing up for what's right means making the hardest choices. If you're enjoying this family drama with all its twists and turns, please hit that like button and subscribe to catch more stories like this one. Trust me, you'll want to see how Cassidy handles this impossible situation and whether justice will be served. Now let's get back to that tense standoff between the siblings. Tyler stared at me for a long moment, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. I recognized that look. It was pure Richard Morgan. "You really think you can take on Dad? He'll destroy you, Cassidy. Just like he destroyed your real father." The fact that Tyler knew about Daniel confirmed my suspicions. "So you did know." "About me not being Richard's biological daughter?" Tyler shrugged. "I overheard them arguing about it years ago. Dad made me promise never to mention it." He leaned forward. "Look, I get that you're angry about being lied to, but this," he tapped the folder, "this is excessive, even as revenge goes." "It's not revenge," I insisted. "It's justice. For Daniel, yes, but also for all the people harmed by these investments." My brother studied me as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "You really believe that, don't you? This moral crusader act isn't just for show." "It's not an act, Tyler." He sighed heavily. "What exactly do you want us to do? We can't just pull out of these investments overnight. The financial implications would be catastrophic." "I've thought about that," I said, pulling out a second folder. "This is a proposal for a 3-year transition plan developed by ethical investment experts. It would allow Morgan Investments to gradually divest from problematic holdings while investing in sustainable alternatives." I didn't mention that Daniel had helped create the plan. Tyler flipped through the proposal, his business mind visibly assessing the viability. "This would cut our profits by at least 30% in the short term and secure the company's future in the long term," I countered. "Environmental regulations are only getting stricter. Social responsibility isn't just ethical, it's becoming good business." "Dad will never agree to this." "Then I guess you'll need to convince him." I gathered my purse and stood up. "You have 3 days to give me an answer. After that, I go to the authorities." Tyler grabbed my wrist. "This isn't a game, Cassidy. You're playing with fire." I pulled my arm free. "No, you and Dad have been playing with fire. I'm just the one pointing out that the house is about to burn down." I walked out of the bar, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. I had just threatened the mighty Richard Morgan, the man whose disapproval had shaped my entire life. There would be no going back from this. Sure enough, the retaliation began almost immediately. That evening, James received a call from the hospital board. Suddenly, his pending promotion to department head was under review. The next day, 3 of my biggest design clients canceled their contracts, citing scheduling conflicts. Our mortgage lender called about irregularities in our loan application that had been approved months ago. "He's trying to scare us," James said, as we sat in our darkened living room that night, both of our phones buzzing with messages we were afraid to read. "It's working," I admitted. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. James took my trembling hands in his. "We knew this might happen. The question is, what do we do now?" I thought about backing down, about calling Tyler and saying it was all a bluff. We could move away, start fresh somewhere Richard Morgan's influence couldn't reach. I could have a relationship with Daniel without destroying my life in the process. But then I thought about those logging operations destroying ancient forests, about indigenous communities forced from their ancestral lands, about rivers poisoned by chemical waste, all so my father could add another zero to his net worth. "We fight back," I said finally, "but we need to be smart about it." The next morning, I called Mia and told her we needed to accelerate our timeline. "We need insurance," I explained, "something to make my father think twice about retaliating further." Mia understood immediately. "I'll prepare a preliminary article based on what we know. If anything happens to you or James, I press publish." Next, I contacted my attorney and arranged for all our evidence to be securely stored with instructions to forward it to the SEC and FBI if we didn't check in every 24 hours. Finally, I called Daniel. "They're coming after us," I explained, "trying to intimidate us into backing down." "I know exactly how that feels," he said grimly. "What can I do to help? I need somewhere safe to stay if things get worse. And I might need financial help. My father is trying to ruin us economically." "My home and resources are at your disposal," Daniel said without hesitation. "Always." With our safety net in place, I waited for Tyler's response. On the third day, exactly at the deadline, I received a text. "Family dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Come alone." James was adamantly opposed to me going. "It's obviously a trap." "Of course it is," I agreed, "but I need to hear what they have to say. At least let me drive you and wait outside." I shook my head. "Too dangerous for you. I've arranged for Mia to be parked down the street. If I don't text her every 30 minutes, she publishes her article and calls the police." I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 7 p.m. The housekeeper let me in with a sympathetic smile. She'd always been fond of me. In the dining room, my parents and Tyler sat at the massive mahogany table where we'd shared countless silent meals over the years. My mother looked exhausted, her perfect facade cracking around the edges. My father's face was a mask of cold fury. "Sit down," he commanded, as if I were still a child. I remained standing. "I prefer to stand." "Always the difficult one," he muttered. "Fine. Let's get to the point. Tyler has informed me of your concerns about certain business practices. My concerns about your illegal activities, I corrected. My father's jaw tightened. Business is complicated, Cassidy. There are gray areas. Money laundering and investing in sanctioned companies aren't gray areas. They're federal crimes, which you have no proof of," my father snapped. I smiled coolly. "We both know that's not true. I have documentation of every illegal transaction for the past 15 years. My mother gasped softly. My father's expression didn't change, but a vein pulsed visibly in his temple. Tyler studied his water glass intently. "What do you want?" my father asked finally. "I've already told Tyler my terms. Divest from all illegal and unethical investments. Make restitution to the communities that have been harmed. Transform Morgan Investments into a company that does good in the world." My father laughed harshly. "You sound just like him." "Like Daniel?" I asked. "Good. I'm proud to be his daughter. He filled your head with his sanctimonious garbage, I see." My father stood up, looming over the table. "Let me make something very clear, Cassidy. I built this company. I made it what it is today. I will not allow you, a girl who has contributed nothing, to dictate how it should be run." Then I'll go to the authorities, I said simply, and destroy this family, your brother's future, your mother's reputation. I looked at my mother, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. You did that when you chose profit over people. When you lied about who I was for 32 years. We gave you everything, my father growled, except the truth. I turned to leave. You have until tomorrow to agree to my terms. After that, I release everything I have to the press and the FBI. If you do this, my father called after me, you are no longer a part of this family. You will be cut off completely. No money, no connections, nothing. I turned back to face them one last time. If you don't do this, there won't be a family left to cut me off from. You'll all be too busy dealing with federal prosecutors. As I walked toward the door, my mother finally spoke. Cassidy, please. Think about what you're doing. I have thought about it, Mother. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking clearly. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. James and I barely slept, jumping at every sound outside our house, expecting Richard's retaliation at any moment. Mia stayed in close contact, ready to publish her exposé if necessary. My attorney kept our evidence secure and prepared for the worst. At exactly noon the next day, the deadline I had set, my phone rang. It was Tyler. Dad wants to meet. Just you and him. That's not happening, I said immediately. I'm not walking into an ambush. It's not an ambush, Tyler insisted. He wants to negotiate. You've made an impression. When and where? His office. 2:00. I considered. The Morgan Investments building would have witnesses' security cameras. It would be safer than meeting in private. I'll be there. But I'm bringing my attorney. Tyler sighed. Fine. Just try to keep an open mind, okay? I arrived with Susan Chen, a formidable attorney specializing in corporate whistleblower cases. The receptionist, who had known me since childhood, looked startled to see me with a lawyer in tow. She called up to my father's office immediately. We were shown into the conference room rather than my father's private office, another good sign. My father sat at the head of the table, flanked by the company's legal counsel, and surprisingly, Tyler, Miss Chen. My father acknowledged my attorney with a curt nod before turning to me. Cassidy. Thank you for coming. The formal politeness was so unlike him that I was immediately suspicious. Let's skip the pleasantries. Have you made a decision? My father slid a document across the table. Our counteroffer. Susan read it carefully before passing it to me. It proposed a 5-year plan for Morgan Investments to divest from its most problematic holdings with immediate withdrawal from any sanctioned companies. It included a substantial fund for environmental remediation and community support in areas affected by their investments. It wasn't everything I had asked for, but it was far more than I had expected my father to concede. Why the change of heart? I asked, suspiciously. Tyler spoke up. I showed Dad the transition plan you gave me. The numbers make sense. The market is moving toward ethical investment anyway. We're just accelerating that shift. I looked at my father, who remained impassive. And you agreed to this, just like that. Your brother can be very persuasive, my father said dryly, and he made me realize something important. What's that? That I'd rather transform the company than lose it entirely. He leaned forward. Make no mistake, Cassidy. I'm not doing this because I've suddenly developed a conscience. I'm doing it because you've left me no choice. At least he was being honest. How do I know you'll actually follow through? That this isn't just to get me to back off. The agreement includes quarterly audits by an independent ethics committee, Tyler explained. Plus, you'll have a seat on the board. You'll be able to monitor compliance yourself. That surprised me. Me on the board. You've demonstrated a certain tenacity that could be valuable, my father admitted grudgingly. And you clearly care about the direction of the company, despite your lack of financial background. Susan and I stepped outside to confer privately. "This is a good deal," she advised. "Better than we'd likely get through legal channels and without the years of litigation." I nodded slowly. "But can I trust them? That's why we build in verification measures." Trust but verify. When we returned to the conference room, I looked my father directly in the eye. "I want one more thing." "Of course you do," he muttered. "A public acknowledgement of Daniel Harrington's innocence, a statement clarifying that he was wrongfully terminated and that any allegations of financial misconduct were false." The muscle in my father's jaw twitched. "Absolutely not. It's non-negotiable." "Dad," Tyler interjected, "it's a small price to pay." My father glared at both of us. "Fine. A brief statement clearing his name. Nothing more. And you'll stop interfering with James's career and our finances," I added, "immediately." "Your husband's hospital situation was a misunderstanding," my father claimed unconvincingly. "But yes, there will be no further complications." After another hour of negotiation over details, we had a final agreement. Susan would formalize it with the company's lawyers, and we would all sign the next day. As we prepared to leave, my father asked for a moment alone with me. Susan looked concerned, but I nodded reassuringly. When everyone else had filed out, my father dropped his businesslike demeanor. "Was it worth it?" he asked, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "Tearing apart this family, your mother can barely get out of bed." "You tore apart this family when you lied to me my entire life," I replied evenly. "When you threatened and destroyed Daniel Harrington for the crime of loving my mother, when you built a business on exploitation and illegal activities. I built this business for you and Tyler," he hissed. "Everything I've done has been for this family." "No," I corrected him. "You did it for yourself, for your ego, for your legacy." He looked at me as if seeing a stranger. "You really aren't a Morgan, are you? Not in your blood, not in your soul." I thought about Daniel Harrington with his ethical principles and warm heart. "No, I'm not, and I'm grateful for that every day." I turned to go, but my father's voice stopped me at the door. "What happens now, with us?" The vulnerability in his question, so uncharacteristic of Richard Morgan, caught me off guard. I considered my answer carefully. "That depends on you," I said finally. "I'll be on the board. We'll work together professionally. Beyond that, you and Mother need to decide if you want a real relationship with me, with the real me, not the daughter you pretended I was. That starts with accepting Daniel as part of my life." My father's face hardened again. "Don't expect miracles, Cassidy." "I don't," I assured him. "I stopped believing in those a long time ago." The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal documents, press statements, and restructuring plans. True to our agreement, Morgan Investments issued a public apology to Daniel Harrington, acknowledging that he had been wrongfully terminated and clearing his name of any wrongdoing. The business press was fascinated by the company's sudden shift toward ethical investment. Some financial analysts predicted doom, others praised the forward-thinking approach. The stock took an initial hit, but stabilized faster than expected. My mother called several times, leaving tearful voicemails that I wasn't ready to respond to. Tyler and I established a cautious professional relationship as we worked on the transition plan. My father maintained a cold distance, communicating only when absolutely necessary. Meanwhile, I began building a relationship with Daniel and his family. His sisters, my aunts, welcomed me warmly, sharing family photos and stories that helped me understand a part of my heritage I'd never known existed. For the first time in my life, I felt I truly belonged somewhere. James and I decided to relocate to Portland to be closer to Daniel. I opened a satellite office of my design firm there, focusing on sustainable architecture and environmentally conscious spaces. James found a position at a teaching hospital where his skills were valued without the Morgan name opening doors or closing them. Gradually, our new life took shape, one built on truth and authenticity rather than appearances and lies. 3 years later, I stood at the podium at Morgan Investment's annual shareholder meeting, presenting our latest sustainability report. The company had exceeded all targets for ethical investment and environmental remediation. Profits had initially dropped as predicted, but were now climbing steadily as our reputation for responsible investing attracted a new generation of clients. In the audience, I spotted my mother, who had finally begun therapy to address her own complicity in my father's actions. Beside her sat Tyler, who had surprised everyone by embracing the company's new direction with genuine enthusiasm. In the back row sat Daniel, my father, not by blood or law, but by choice and character. Next to him was James, holding our 6-month-old daughter, Eliza Harrington Hamilton. After years of lies and secrets, I had found my truth. After decades of trying to fit into someone else's vision of family, I had created my own. And in standing up against injustice, both personal and global, I had discovered my own strength. As I finished my presentation to appreciative applause, I couldn't help but think of that moment in my parents' study 3 years earlier. When my father had cruelly said, "We wish you were never born," I had stood tall and said, "If that's true, then I wish I had never been a Morgan." And now I don't have to be. I was Cassidy Harrington Hamilton, now daughter, wife, mother, advocate, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly who I was meant to be. Wow, what a journey we've been on together. Cassidy's story reminds us that sometimes the most painful family revelations can lead to our greatest growth. Have you ever experienced a moment when standing up for what's right meant risking everything? I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family secrets or moments of justice in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your truth. Drop a like if you enjoyed Cassidy's journey from family outcast to powerful advocate. I'm so grateful for your support, and I'll be back next week with another powerful story about finding strength in unexpected places. Until then, remember that your true family might not always be the one you were born into. Sometimes it's the one you build for yourself.